This is Before the Pitch, where you can love New York baseball no matter what shade of blue you are wearing. And this is the part one of our reaction to everything that's gone down between the Astros, Red Sox, and Mets as a result of the Stein stealing scandal. The reason why it's in two parts is because me and Billy cannot record at the same time this week, but that's okay because you can get my opinions at part one, his opinions at part two. You guys should really be looking forward to part two. The reason why is because Billy is a Mets fan and actually has the bigger dog to fight in this whole fiasco. And he and I have not discussed on our personal time how we feel about everything. So I generally have no idea how he feels or what he agrees or what he disagrees with. So I'm just as anxious to watch his opinions as you guys are because I'm going to find out everything with all the rest of you guys. We're going to try to keep this as organized as possible. There's a lot to unpack. I think the punishment against the Astros, I am content with. I think too many people were expecting an unrealistic punishment, and I do think the one they have is it fits the crime, in my opinion. I do think the most effective part of it is the loss of the draft picks, and the reason why is because the Astros have had a steady flow of talent coming in, and also a steady flow of people who they can send out to bring other guys in as trade pieces. Now, with the absence of these draft picks for the next few years, that's going to stop that flow of talent coming in or talent tradable, and it's going to force them to sell off the people who they do have in order to compensate for that. So I do think that it's going to have a effect that will stretch a little while and affect them over some time, which I do think is a property of the punishment that I felt was important to begin with. It had to expand more beyond more than just this one year. Now, I predicted, or me and Billy, our kind of plans we had involved maybe a little bit more of a money thing. There's going to be more of a financial punishment. That doesn't seem to be the case for union reasons, but we were expecting more in that regard. That didn't happen. I think I'm content with what they have. I was not expecting the championship to get taken away, nor did I think we should have. I have since been persuaded on that opinion. And the reason why is because I cannot think of another way where players can be punished that is practical, fair, and doesn't affect people who weren't involved. And taking the championship away is, the more I think about it, the only way you can really ensure of those three things. So at bare minimum, I am not restarting this video. That was my phone. I am not restarting this video. At bare minimum, these players can at least not call themselves the true World Series champions because they kind of don't deserve it at this point. But here's some of the suggestions I keep seeing coming up and why I don't think they are the best ways to have punished the Astros. One, when you say, "Oh, we'll just find out the players." Well, here's the thing. I think Manfred has a point where it's impractical to figure out who exactly cheated and who didn't, and that's part of it. And the reason why is because you can't find someone who wasn't taking place in this whole thing. And let me say this. Let's say you have like a backup infielder who didn't get any at-bats, who did not cheat. Now you're finding him for something that other people did? What about pitchers? Pitchers don't hit at home at Minute Maid Park. So now you're finding the pitchers who did not engage in this activity? That doesn't seem fair, especially when, if you go back to the backup person, they're going to likely be making less money and can't afford the price tag on that fine that they have to pay because of other people. So I do not think the fine is fair unless you were to somehow figure out who cheated, how much, when, and then distribute it that way. And you pay a heftier fine for the more you did it, and those who didn't don't get to pay the fine. But again, that's impractical. We can't do that. You can't have the postseason ban because, first of all, what do we mean by postseason ban? Are the Houston Astros in general not allowed to participate in the postseason? That's not fair to anyone who came in after the fact. That's not fair to a Zach Greinke who had nothing to do with that. Now you're saying he has nothing to fight for? That's not fair to anyone who's going to come in now for any reason. You can't just exclude them. Do we just exclude the players who were involved in 2017 that should the Astros make the postseason, they can't play. Well, that's not fair to the few people who did work their tails off all year and now have to go without the rest of their team. It's also not fair to the other people who now have to throw into a fire playoff baseball that they don't deserve to be in and probably aren't equipped to be in. That's not fair to anyone either. And you also have to ask yourself, what if the Astros don't make the playoffs? So does that mean the ban doesn't come into effect until they finally do qualify for the playoffs? So if that's the case, the Astros aren't even competing, and what are they there for? And that's not even fair to every other team. The fact that this team can only punish them by losing to them, but they can't gain anything by beating them. There's way too many there's way too many parts of that. And the last one that you see is suspend the players for the year. It goes back to the finding thing. How do you decide who gets suspended? And it's impractical to do that, which is why I will back Manfred when he says we can't go to every individual player. I also think the problem as in a whole was a systematic problem. Yes, it was player driven with Alex Cora kind of being the head of it. So we do know that I got some approval by someone on staff. And I will say AJ Hinch approved this, even though he did not say no and he did not say yes. And we do know he trashed 2 monitors, but 2 monitors isn't all the monitors, and 2 monitors isn't stopping the problem. He enabled it, therefore he approved it. This is a systematic issue, and I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of you have to punish the system for it and the management for that. My one thing I'm going to say about AJ Hinch is when he says, what's it called? Oh no, it wasn't AJ Hinch. It was the GM who said, "Oh, I didn't know that was going on." You're an idiot. That you're the GM. That's your responsibility. Everything that goes on in the dugout is AJ Hinch's responsibility, and it's also things you have to know about. That is part of your job. So if you don't get fired for participating, you get fired for being terrible at your job, and yes, you deserve that, and that goes for both of them. Now we are going to talk about the Red Sox. Now, we have yet to know exactly what punishment MLB is going to put on Alex Cora, but he has parted ways with the Red Sox. Now, I'm going to give a hot take. If MLB doesn't say they're going to punish Alex Cora, I think there is a much, much less likely scenario that the Red Sox actually fire him. I do believe part of the Astros and the Red Sox firing the people they do fire is to save face for the organization, to say, and to kind of put the load on them and to say, but we as an organization do not approve of this. And this is their way of saving face with the public and saving face with the fans. And I understand why they did that. The weird thing is this puts a lot of pressure on the Mets that shouldn't have had to be. So now I'm going to kind of move over to the Mets right now. I was of the position leading up until today saying the Mets should not get rid of Beltran. The reason why is because it is not the Mets' job to punish someone for doing something wrong somewhere else when the somewhere else isn't even going to punish him. Whether intentional or not, MLB gave the Mets a break, and the Mets should have capitalized on that break that they got. Would press conferences suck? Yeah, but there's ways you can get around the press conference. You can come out and say, I will answer no questions about Astros or cheating or whatever. If they do keep asking that questions, you just walk off of stage. I would have rather the Mets have sucked that up and kind of found a way to deal with that instead of now going into battle with the guy who we all know, whoever this guy is going to be, is not the guy who's supposed to be there. I do not think that's good for team chemistry. I do not think that sends the best message out. I do not know if that's the best way to get the team hype. And also, clearly this guy isn't the dude you want for the role, so maybe he's less likely to get the job done that you need, which is problematic for the Mets because they're in a position too fragile to kind of mess with the mojo that they've been trying to get going. So I've been in this position. That's not the Mets' problem. And if Major League Baseball is going to let him go unpunished, that's not your problem. That's because it's not a Mets problem. As the Mets, you can't make yourself the victim of something you have no involvement in. This is something that fell into their lap, kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, between if you take them or not. But to me, one of these directions was clearly a better direction than the other. The Mets did not do that. They have parted ways with Carlos Beltran, and apparently Carlos Beltran has been asking to stay, and the Mets said no. They did not want to deal with that disaster. I'm not going to say they were unjustified. I just do not think that was the best option, and I really think that's going to come back and bite the Mets in the rear end. Now, the question of Carlos Beltran getting punished goes back to MLB. MLB, the worst thing MLB could be in this situation is inconsistent. And depending on what aspect you're looking at, they're going to be inconsistent with one thing but not the other. Let me explain. If the Astros decided to punish Beltran, they would be consistent in the fact that they're punishing the people whose names were named, but inconsistent in their claim that players will not be punished, because they would essentially be saying players except Carlos Beltran. And then that's not almost fair for letting other players off the hook. But this comes back down to what baseball said. We can't determine what players were involved, so you might as well not even go that halfway, because they determined they are going to stay consistent with the claim of not punishing players. Beltran was a player. No matter what way you slice this, Major League Baseball in some way was going to have to swallow their pride with something by letting someone go somewhere, or by punishing someone who might not have been involved. There was no easy way out of this, but Major League Baseball decided to take that route and say, we are content with swallowing this pill. And I do not believe the Mets were under the obligation that they had to almost right the decision that might have been wrong. I do not think that's the best job. They did. I do not like this. Billy does not like this. I know for a fact Billy does not like that. But I don't know the details of how he thinks. And that pretty much brings us to the time that we're at right now. The most recent developments is the possibility that Altuve didn't want his shirt ripped off because there might be a buzzer thing underneath or something he didn't want to show. That part is equally as true as it's not true. It can be, the explanation Altuve gave was his wife didn't want him to take his shirt off. He's from a different country. He's from a different culture. I'm not going to judge. That could very well be entirely true. It could also not be true. The thing you really have to take away with this is this shows how much we don't trust them anymore. I think if I had to put money on this, I think this is kind of clickbaity. I do not think there was anything under his shirt. But in that same breath, nothing short of Jesus is going to convince me he did not know that pitch was coming. And that's all I got now. Make sure you guys subscribe to our channel so you can see Billy's part 2. That should be coming up, be uploaded just a little bit after this. Hopefully by the time you guys see it, it would be up already. Make sure you go check that out, because I'm definitely going to check it out, because once again, I have not talked to him yet. I only know that one thing, that one little thing that I said a little bit earlier, and I cannot wait to see what he says. So until next time, we are still going to do the decade in review. The problem is all this stuff came out right when we were planning on doing that, so it keeps having to get pushed back. We'll save that for a rainy day, and we'll have some good things to talk about then. Adios, amigos. Make sure you subscribe. Go check out part 2 to this video. Super important.